The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today, Tricia Barker, had a profound near-death experience during her senior year at college, and this experience guided her to teach overseas, in public schools, and at the college level. Her near-death experience story has been featured in I Survived, Beyond and Back, and was covered in National Geographic. Tricia's memoir, Angels in the OR, What Dying Taught Me About Healing, Survival, and Transformation, will be available for purchase in the summer of 2019. Tricia teaches English at a community college in Fort Worth and interviews near-death experiencers, researchers, and healers on her YouTube channel. Tricia's poetry and essays have been published in several publications, including the Binnacle, the Paterson Literary Review, and the Midwest Quarterly. Tricia, welcome to NDE Radio.
Hi, Lee. So great to be here. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on. Tricia, let's begin by you're telling the listeners about your NDE.
All right. Yeah, it's the best story of my life, right? And it's my death.
Yes.
So I was agnostic at the time of my near-death experience, and someone said to me the other day they feel like perhaps my near-death experience was fated because with the types of injuries that I had, it's rare for someone to not be able to go into surgery until 17 hours after that traumatic car accident. But I ended up having to wait for a neurosurgeon to operate on me, and I had lots of internal injuries. Well, those first moments outside of my body, I was convinced that the consciousness outside of our form is the true reality and the truth, and that this body is just a vehicle of that consciousness. And I knew so much more. I experienced so much more just in those first few seconds outside of my body, looking at the operating table, looking at that body bloody and opened up. I had spinal injuries, so they had my back and hip completely opened up and blood was spilling out. And I was at peace. I was like, if I have to leave this body, that's fine, because now I know I'm so much more. But I did want to return so that I could argue with all my agnostic friends and go, oh, we were so wrong. We were wrong. Just in those first moments. But I had a very profound near-death experience, and I saw angels. And these angels blew me away, Lee. Like, they really were fantastic. They were about 8 or 9 feet tall, and that's why I titled my book Angels in the OR, because that was the most shocking moment of my near-death experience, is to see that we truly are guided and divinely guided by the other side. And these angels were sending light messages through their eyes and into my body and healing into my body. And they also slowed down and told the surgeon, or told me to watch as they sent this light through the back of their surgeons, through their hands and into my body. And I was certain that I would walk, because that was my fear before surgery. I'd lost feeling in my left leg. And, running was important to me. And, that was a very frightening thought, that I might not walk. And they assured me that I would be fine, that I would walk and run and continue with life. But then the monitor flatlined. So I realized I had not technically been dead until that moment. And I was just out of body. And then I was dead. And I saw the surgeons and step back, hurriedly, and people rush around. And then I was like, ooh, I don't want to watch this. I'm going to go explore something a little bit more fun than this. And left the hospital, saw my stepdad, who was getting a candy bar from a vending machine, and later verified that detail. And then I floated and felt this oneness with everyone in the town of Austin. And just felt great peace, like floating in the night sky. And I was beginning to feel a connection with God. So it was not a strong connection. I call it like a piece of light was coming for me. And then that tunnel experience that a lot of people experience, I kind of transitioned And it's so hard to explain time. That's where I really struggle with the near-death experience, because some things seem to happen at once, some knowledge seemed to be given to me instantaneously, and then other things seem to have somewhat of a chronological moment. So somewhere in that experience, I began to transition into a new place, and I also had somewhat of a life review. So I felt like this God consciousness was forcing me to look at parts of my life, and nothing that was particularly painful that was done to me, like all of that was just washed away. So any pain that we experience at the hands of others, that's not part of the life review. It's really how we live, like our choices. And our choices to enjoy life, to be one with nature, to be peaceful and loving and good to other people. Those are like the moments heaven is cheering for us. Like, oh yeah, you got it right. You were kind, you were good, you were loving.
How did your past life appear to you? Some people say it's like on a screen, or
mine was a little different. It was like the cosmos or the universe was beginning to show up, and the light of God at the same time. And it was kind of like a screen, but it was like a bubble. So it was like thrown across the night sky, and then I saw little interactions. I saw myself as a kid with animals being sweet. I saw myself, in other situations, kind of brushed aside, like, don't act like that, act like this instead. And then one particular instance where I was shown the hearts of other people that I was interacting with, and they were almost like in a bubble, so it was like I could experience the past and feel those emotions, but I was also a consciousness far away from it, looking at it. Does that kind of make sense? I know it's so hard to explain.
Yes, it does. Did your angels travel with you when you left the hospital?
No, I got the sense that they stayed with my body. So maybe as I was being revived, they were continuing to work on my body.
Yeah, that's a great image, the healing light flowing from the angels through the doctor's hands into the work that she was doing. It's quite powerful.
And she was not even religious, and that always struck me too, that she was not necessarily a believer, but she was someone who did a very good job and cared a lot for people and wanted to be a great neurosurgeon and make great strides in her field. And so I think sometimes when we're just filled with a passion to help others, the other side can work through us, whether we believe or not, and it's kind of amazing.
Now, after your life review, what happened?
Well, then I transitioned into that heavenly realm, and the grass was so green. There was no death there. There was all just brilliant, beautiful life. And there did seem to be, oddly, a wind that was blowing through this thick green grass, but it was a very happy wind, not like a powerful wind that's going to knock you over, just this beautiful, peaceful, flowing grass that flowed, for a long way. And then this was kind of an odd part of my near-death experience, but my grandfather was there, and he was the only one who I knew who was dead. And I wouldn't have recognized him because he was so young, and I only knew him as a much older man. But his form looked like he was in his late 30s or early 40s, and I barely recognized his jawline. But then he showed me a truck that he had given our family, and he used to drive me around in this truck when I was a kid, and I would sit on the back and let my feet kind of go through the grass. And so I thought, well, this is fun. I'll just be a kid again and sit on the back of this truck. And then he kind of carried me along through this grass, and I just felt peaceful, and I was reminded there were certain messages that came to me during my near-death experience, and they were like big. It was like the voice of God, but it was a strong message. And one of these messages is that love is all that matters. And, I let that sink in. And then another one was be like a little child. And so I was being like a little child, in my near-death experience, just playing and loving and being happy and looking at animals in the grass and feeling at peace. And then my grandfather turned toward me, and like the angels, he communicated telepathically with great love in his eyes. And he said, do you want to continue on? And And I knew that that meant, possible death and never returning and going toward God. And I just said yes with every bit of hope and joy and love in my heart. I was like, there's nothing more that I want than to be near God. Just I could feel that love, and I wanted to go toward it. And there was this light kind of in the right-hand corner, like a sun, and I just started going toward that sun. And as I was going toward that bright light, I felt more loved than I'd ever felt in my life. And everything that I'd been searching for in life was completed and found there. So I've never felt as good as I felt there, and I don't think that I ever will in this form. I don't think it's possible. So people talk about, romantic love and passion or a parent's love for a kid, and just none of it compares. It is just paltry in comparison to that love. That love is so powerful, just fills every cell of your body, and you feel both freedom and comfort and absolute utter peace and joy and happiness and every good emotion that you can possibly feel, you feel there. And so I felt people's prayers trying to pull me back to my body. And I remember thinking, oh, that's sweet, whatever, bye-bye. But you can't hold me back. I'm not going back. And I think, though, in retrospect, feeling their prayers is important, because even when people transition, maybe they're hearing the prayers of people who love to them, and so they're never wasted. And that was kind of sweet. And
some people are actually called back by the prayers of others. It's a powerful enough message that's why they return.
I know. I guess I wasn't moved. That love of God was so much more to me, and I was going toward it, and then God stopped me, and I felt like this booming voice say, stop. And I was forced to look down, and it looked like all these souls along a river. And I just knew that they were souls, but they were little lights, and some didn't have their lights turned on, and some had their lights turned on, and they were flowing. And I thought the river maybe represented life. And God was like, you're going to go back and you're going to be a teacher. And I knew this to not be a spiritual teacher, but to be an actual teacher in a public school. And then in college, and I thought, oh, no, God, you're out of your mind. I hate public speaking. I'm not going to do this. That is just a job for people who don't make any money. No way. Keep me here, or let me go back and be a lawyer or an editor or something. And God was like, no, you're going back. And I argued a little more. And as I argued, I felt this kind of dark wind, sucking me back into my body. And I was like, oh, no, I've been kicked out of heaven and into my body. And from the minute I woke up, I knew I had a near-death experience. There was never a doubt. Some people forget, and some people, it takes them a long time to process. I mean, I still had to process, but I knew, the minute they were feeding me ice chips, I was like, hey, I died.
Let me take you back a minute and ask you, what animals did you see in that tall grass?
Rabbits, of all things. And,
rabbits. Wow.
Yeah, this was important to me because as a kid, I had a couple of moments where I really wanted to know if there was a God. And one of the moments was, I was 5 or 6, and I went into this briar patch, and I sat in the lotus position, and I closed my eyes, and I was like, if there's a God, please let these rabbits come to me and know me. And so I felt very still and closed my eyes, and then I opened my eyes, and the little baby rabbits were playing all around my feet. I mean, so close to me, I could reach out and touch them. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. And then another moment in childhood when I didn't believe that there was a God, I ended up, just asking God for a sign, and I said I wanted $100. And then on my 10th birthday, my grandfather gave me that $100, and he died a few months later.
Huh. Was he the only person that you saw when you were there, or did you see any other beings, spiritual beings?
No, it was just him and God and the angels, so I didn't see any other ancestors, and I didn't have many family members that were dead at that time, so
sure,
he was the only one I knew.
And was it just a great, huge, empty field, or were there trees? Were there any flowers?
I didn't see flowers, but I saw clouds and this beautiful, bright blue sky, and the field seemed to go on and on and on, as if there was much more. Like it seemed to be just a restful, peaceful place. And I kind of understood that since I could manipulate my form from, a 22-year-old to a kid, that maybe my grandfather brought that car into existence to calm me down and to help me recognize him, and that we could kind of manipulate things there, with what we wanted to do.
Right. So when you were a child on the back of the truck, you were actually seeing yourself as a child again. Yeah. But
at 22, I guess I wanted to pick that form as the form to enter heaven.
And so you were a child of about what age, would you say?
Probably anywhere between 5 and 7, that age.
Wow. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could go back to an age just like that?
Oh, no.
What a wonderful experience to be able to be there again and feel that way again, and have the body of a 7-year-old and the mind of a 7-year-old. Oh.
And the joy, the deep joy, and the being in the moment of beauty. I think children are so capable of just having a deep joy and hope without being tarnished by pain and disappointment.
Yes. So when you came out, did you tell the first person you saw that you'd had a near-death experience, or who did you tell?
Yeah, so they were feeding me ice chips, and as soon as they took the tracheotomy out, and my voice was all, and I don't know how I sounded. I just know that I made the attempt.
Hoarse.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But I asked the nurse who was feeding me ice chips after I became oriented again to my body, said, I need to see Dr. Flan. She was my surgeon. And I need to ask her something. And so Dr. Flan walked in, and I said, I died. I know I died. How long was I dead? And she was really startled. And she said, we thought we lost you for a couple of minutes, but you're fine. We're getting blood transfusions. You're gonna be absolutely fine. And I was like, how'd you revive me? I wanted to know more. And she just kept kind of patting my arm, going, look, you lost a lot of blood. Let's just get these transfusions in you, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah. And how soon after this experience did you start thinking about your impending career as a teacher?
Immediately. And I was kind of angry but resigned at the same time, because if that's the last thing you hear from God, you're not going to go against it. That would be absolute foolishness.
What I think is very interesting about that is that God, a teacher is imparting knowledge, book learning, not spiritual learning, but at the same time, a teacher that is in the spirit is imparting a lot along with that, math and English and all the things that you learn in school. So God must want our teachers to be infused with that, with that spiritual awareness as well.
Oh, yeah. The kids are hurting so much. And what I found is that my kindness was the most important thing I could do for anyone to bring them into greater peace. So whatever subject matter you teach, that is, of course, important. But I taught, high school and college English. So poetry and stories have so many themes, morals. There's so many different ways to talk about things that are relevant to their lives. And I know that the other side participated in helping me reach certain students simply through a lecture sometimes, of just talking about, Walt Whitman, Song of Myself, and some of the transcendental messages, or, other elements of stories where, pretty intense modern themes might come up, and some contemporary stories that relate to their own lives. And then we could talk about healing, and we could talk about moving forward, and really just there were many opportunities to reach them at their level through literature.
Yeah. What a powerful choice Walt Whitman is. What a spiritual writer who integrated spirit and life and interesting too that, his leaves of grass, that's what you saw when you were up there.
Yeah, he was the perfect one to talk about near-death experiences. And as odd as it is, and, other teachers have asked me about this later. They're like, you did that? I've talked about my near-death experience in connection to Whitman every time I taught him. And so most every class has heard my near-death experience. And I thought, people go to IANDS and they expect these stories, but you don't expect one in a high school classroom. That kind of jars you into a different way.
And
of
yet
being.
I think kids are very apt to respond to something like that. I mean, it's such an amazing story. It would really fascinate and teach them something about the power of the spirit, as well as, their life with their iPhones and everything.
Oh yeah. There's always a million questions.
Tell our listeners a little about, because you've taught lots of different places. Tell them how your career has gone so far.
Yeah, so I've taught in inner city schools. I've taught in country schools that were quite poor. I've taught at boarding schools that are quite exclusive on the East Coast, and then community colleges for the last 10 years. And I think that variety of students across the nation, and then across the world too, I taught in South Korea, has really just shown me the innocence of students and their true desire for a better life, no matter who they are, and their questioning spirit. And it is a sacred job, because you are talking to the souls of people and getting them to do really deep analysis about, their essence, their truth, who they want to be, apart from who their parents want them to be. You're teaching them how to believe in themselves, how to deprogram their minds from the culture. And, there's so much that can be taught in an English class, that it's really kind of beautiful. And the biggest changes, have been in schools where, students are deeply hurting. There's more trauma and more shocking stories than anyone can imagine in a public school.
Yes. Now, you've published poetry. Did you bring some with you today to share with the audience?
Yeah, I did. So I was so certain that I'd had a near-death experience that even when I had all that morphine running through me, I asked for a journal and a pad of paper, and I wrote part of this poem about the angels while I was still hooked up to IVs and all that, because I was afraid that I would forget it, because I thought, oh my God, what if all this medicine rushing through me makes me forget this experience? I didn't realize I'd remember it forever, that it would be the most powerful and the most profound experience in my life. But yeah, this one got published, and I actually got $50 for it. I feel like a really good through it. But you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's called After the Wreck. How could I know that the world would have compassion, and that at the moment of impact, my back would crack, but I would retain the sensation of this body, first floating away from it, then returning, silvered and open-mouthed, like a fish caught on the hook of a reoccurring dream, struggling, flapping about, and jerked up to the surface of a room full of fluorescence, tiny desires to survive pulsing through my body in rivulets. How could I know that the angels I recalled from paintings would become bright, intelligent companions at the end of my bed, and that the torrential light from their eyes would answer my questions instantly? How could I know that eternal peace would disintegrate like ice chips in my mouth, and some of the calming knowledge would drown for a while in refills of morphine? How could I know I would forget some of the messages in the way we forget whispers in dreams?
Very nice. Wow.
Thanks.
And do you have another one?
Yeah, this one is kind of short, but one thing that I took back from my near-death experience was I had some beautiful friendships, and it seemed like soul contracts with certain people. And I remembered at different times, like, who we were in spirit. And we were just like spirits that would fly with each other and laugh in the afterlife. And so this is kind of about that, but flying.
Okay.
is the physical sensation of love, like a flock of startled Canadian geese rising up from a pond, blood rising in your veins, fear, anticipation. If you have memories before birth, they are a flight of colors, of people who you know now, and laughter. The choice to experience the eternal in temporary, fleeting moments is why we call love falling.
Wow. Well, after you've finished with your book about near-death experience, were you thinking about a book of poetry?
Yeah, so it was so hard writing a book, Lee, that I was like, I'm never going to write one again. And then I'm kind of rested now. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to write one for college students. I'm going to write a book of poetry, and I'm going to write a young adult novel. So maybe after all that, I'll quit. But definitely I'll put the poetry together.
Well, tell the listeners about the book you're working on now, and you plan on having it published by next summer.
Well, yeah, I have a literary agent and a publisher, and I just turned in my final edit. So they're working on, I'm excited to see the book cover design, which is going to be the angels and the OR working through the surgeon. So I can't wait to see it. It'll be fun, to see how artists depict that. And, so hopefully they said May or June it will be available in print and then an ebook and Audible as well.
Oh, terrific. And you could do an Audible too.
Yeah, I'm begging. So Simon & Schuster is doing the Audible, and I'm begging them to let me read it. I mean, they have their set of, readers that they choose from, but I keep asking my main editor, I'm like, let me do it.
I think if you want to read it, I think you should have the right to read your own book, for goodness sake.
Right.
Now, tell us as well about you're interviewing other NDEers on your YouTube site. So tell us what motivated you to start that and how our listeners can find it.
Well, it was kind of random, but I thought, well, I've been interviewed by a couple of different people, Yannicka from Wisdom from North, and I loved her questions, loved her channel, and I was like, I wonder what it would be like as a near-death experiencer to interview other near-death experiencers. We could both, connect in a way like, oh, yeah, I had this part like you, or no, that's different from mine, and kind of decompress it and be there for each other. And what I found is I didn't expect this, but it was so amazing that I would hear some near-death experiences, and then I'd go meditate after doing an interview, and I'd relive parts of their near-death experience and really just kind of connect with some of them that were, very energetically profound for me. And it was like, what a nice after effect. And I began to wonder if people listening to these who haven't had near-death experiences have the same kind of effect from listening to these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I love it.
And if they wanted to tune into that, how would they do that?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. If you just type in my name, Tricia Barker, Near-Death Experience, you'll probably find it on YouTube, but it is Healed by the Light, the YouTube channel name.
Wow. Tricia, thank you so much. We're out of time, but thank you for telling us both your fascinating story and about the career that followed and the good work you're doing with the students. If listeners would like to hear the show again or any of our past shows, just go to our website at nderadio.org and hit the past shows button. And for information about IANDS, just go to their website at IANDS.org and be with us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.